CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libyan delegations hold security and military talks in Egypt. UN chief says world has reached agonizing milestone as global number of COVID-19 cases passes the 1 million mark. And record flooding in Sudan destroys homes and livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahem Mutua in Nairobi. Joining me now with your business headlines is Ramanyang.
That's right, Mahem. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Nigeria has set up a new outfit to help recover stolen assets stashed away in foreign countries. And South Africa lost over 2 million jobs in the second quarter of the year. We'll take a look at the latest in unemployment data from Africa's most industrialized economy and plenty more in the course of the hour. For now, the latest in current affairs with Mahi.
Rama, thank you. Let's begin with Libya, where military and police teams from eastern and western parts of the country are holding security talks in Egypt. The discussions are backed by the United Nations support mission in Libya. The UN mission has thanked the Egyptian government for supporting the talks and hosting the delegates. The organization says it expects that the outcome of these face-to-face meetings will be factored in during the formation of a joint military commission.
We have representatives from the western side of Libya, the government who represent the government of National Accord, and the rivals, the LNA forces, the Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, and also military and security leaders from his side. This basically means that these are the people responsible for the fighting and the security on the ground, and therefore talking between them is quite significant. What they're discussing, they're basically discussing a lasting ceasefire with both parties holding the current dividing line of Sirt and Al Jufra, a strategic line that Egypt has set, and since President El-Sisi has set that line, neither sides have breached it. This is basically what they will be discussing, how to maintain that ceasefire and also how to maintain security and unify both the military and police powers all over Libya so that they can have a body, a security body that has monopoly rights to hold arms and disarm the rest of the militias. And this security body, military or police, should be representing the entire Libyan government and therefore the entire Libyan people, and therefore must be trusted by everyone. That's the key goal for these talks. The UN is mainly the main sponsor for the 5+5 military talks that has been discussing all the military and conflict concerns on the ground. Two other tracks, the economic talks and the political talks, are also sponsored by the UN. But this one specifically will be infused or will be included mainstreamed in the talks that is led by the United Nations. And therefore, this is considered quite crucial for the success of the upcoming talks in October. This will be basically an indicator of how Libyans are willing or the possibility for them to agree on a common agenda, specifically when it comes to territorial divisions, maintaining security and distributing key roles like the military and the police or the interior ministry among them.
The global coronavirus death toll has passed the 1 million mark, and the World Health Organization is warning that the figure could be an underestimate. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the world has reached what he called an agonizing milestone.
And still there is no end in sight to the spread of the virus, the loss of jobs, the disruption of education, the upheaval of our lives. We can overcome this challenge, but we must learn from the mistakes. Responsible leadership matters, science matters, cooperation matters, and misinformation kills. As the relentless hunt for a vaccine continues, a vaccine that must be available and affordable to all, let's do our part to save lives. Let us never forget that our future rests on solidarity, as people united and as United Nations.
While the number of coronavirus deaths this year is now double the number of people who die annually from malaria. The death rate has increased in recent weeks as infections surge in several countries. Experts say the official figures for global deaths and cases significantly underrepresent the real tally because of inadequate testing and recording. The United States, Brazil and India, which together account for nearly 45% of all COVID-19 deaths globally, have all lifted social distancing measures in recent weeks. Well, the Republic of Congo has lifted an imposed nationwide curfew in 10 regions and relaxed it in the 2 main cities there. The curfew will now run from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. local time in Pointe-Noire and the capital, Brazzaville. The country has reported nearly 5,000 cases of COVID-19 since mid-March. Several rights groups recently called for the full lifting of the curfew, saying relaxation of the measure had been counterproductive and had led to unemployment. Meanwhile, here in Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta has announced a further easing of restrictions, including the reopening of bars and the reduction of the dusk to dawn curfew to 5 hours a day. The curfew will now run from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. for 2 months. The ease of COVID-19 restrictions come after a drop in COVID-19 infections had been noted. Well, in Uganda, many private schools may not reopen when classes resume on the 15th of October due to financial distress caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Planning Authority estimates close to 4,000 schools are at risk of closure, affecting thousands of learners. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria with that report.
Richard Buyondo has walked a rough journey since school closed in March. His Elbaris group of schools was forced to send away all the teachers because he couldn't afford to pay their salaries. Buyondo was also finding it hard to continue paying for the teachers' accommodation. He's now turned some classrooms into teachers' quarters.
We could not continue renting outside the community. So we decided, since we have empty spaces in the school, let them come and get accommodated in the school. As we wait, once we start again, then we shall re-rent them outside. So we are saving the pressure from the landlords because there's no income coming in.
A number of schools in Uganda have been redesigned for use as guest houses or rental houses to try and earn some money from them. Some have had to sell off their properties. About 1.2 million learners are expected to report back to school on 15th October, but there is uncertainty on whether all of them will be back. Apart from some schools having to shut down, several people have lost jobs and they will not be able to afford paying school fees. Uganda is reopening schools for final year students only as part of lifting COVID-19 restrictions. School owners like Buyondo are worried they may not be able to run their schools efficiently when they eventually reopen due to the huge loans they are servicing.
We also have loans that we need to take care of, that, we plan like this year, we will take this amount of money, do this amount of development, then pay over a year, which means all those loans have not been able to be, we've not paid them, we've not met our obligations. And then the banks, they have not been very helpful.
The government has announced it will support private schools with a grant of about $5.4 million, but this money has not yet been released. Some teachers have now started saving and cooperative schemes to raise money.
We want to use this circle to see that we build a financial arm where we do save little money we get onto our income and we create reserve so that in future when we have another pandemic or another problem, we're able to sustain our schools longer than the situation we have been in.
School owners say having only final year students in school won't help sort their financial difficulties. Buyondo is still holding on to his Elbury schools, but he's urging the government to consider allowing the lower classes to start school again. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Health authorities in Tunisia have been advising vulnerable groups to get a flu shot this year. Experts warn it is possible to contract both the seasonal flu and the coronavirus. Tunisia has seen a sharp spike in COVID-19 cases in recent weeks. Adnan Shawashi has more from Tunis.
The Director General of the Pasteur Institute in Tunis declared that social groups most prone to contracting COVID-19, as well as the seasonal flu, are older people, patients with chronic diseases, as well as pregnant women.
The
impact of the seasonal flu should not be neglected or ignored. We are at the beginning of the flu season in autumn and winter, while we're witnessing the spread of the coronavirus. The symptoms can look the same, but the two illnesses are caused by different viruses.
Dr. Hashmi Luzir added that 310,000 doses of vaccine against the seasonal flu will be available in hospitals, private pharmacies and clinics on the 1st of October.
The flu vaccine is necessary. It does not cure or protect from COVID-19, but limits it. The two viruses are different in terms of immunity. The seasonal flu vaccine will help healthcare units determine the nature of the virus. Otherwise, if the most vulnerable people do not opt for the flu vaccine, confusion will reign as hospitals are already overwhelmed.
Tunisia's COVID-19 task force reported 50 infection cases per 100,000 inhabitants. The number of cases requiring hospitalization has also increased.
In this period, if we seek to reduce the pace of the spread of the virus, we do not have any choice except the implementation of the preventive measures. This is a shared responsibility. We are all responsible for the protection of those most vulnerable.
Infectious disease experts warned of a possible second wave of COVID-19 if citizens do not follow health protocols. According to the COVID-19 task force, the sharp rise in recent days in the number of deaths, infections, hospitalizations and calls to the emergency units is alarming and very dangerous. Experts say the risk of infection will increase over the next few days, which will be characterized by falling temperatures and cold. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And here's what's coming up on Africa Live. Mali's transitional administration ponders next step after ECOWAS delays lifting of sanctions. And heavy fighting continues between Azerbaijan and Armenia for a third day.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Adnan Shawashi, Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. Let's now head to Mali, where ECOWAS says it will not be lifting sanctions yet until all demands for return to full civilian rule are met. According to the West African Economic Bloc's ambassador, who is former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, there are a few grey areas that need to be discussed. This comes days ahead of the announcement of a new cabinet by the new Prime Minister, Mokhtar Ouane. Well, for more on that story, let's now speak to CGTN's Deji Badmus in Lagos for more on that. Deji, what has the reaction been to ECOWAS's stance that it will not at this time be lifting the sanctions?
Well, Mahir, there's been quiet across the region. We haven't heard anything at all, with the exception, of course, of the military or the government now, the government in Mali asking ECOWAS to lift the sanctions. But let me just talk about those gray areas that former President Goodluck Jonathan of Nigeria talked about, who is, of course, the special envoy of ECOWAS to Mali. Now, those gray areas actually relate to the position of the vice president that is being occupied by Colonel Assimi Goïta, who actually led the coup that overthrew the presidency of Boubacar Keïta. You know, ECOWAS had actually asked that both the president and the vice president be civilians, of course, the prime minister as well. But what we've had so far is that we have a situation where the vice president of Mali is the vice president of Mali now is a military ruler. I mean, he's a military man. So what ECOWAS wants is it wants clarity on his position. What are his responsibilities and all of that. So and that's the reason why the sanctions are still in place. But we expect that there's going to be a meeting. President Buhari said, well, that the ECOWAS chairman, who is the president of Ghana now, may call a meeting in the coming days, and then the leaders of the region would sit down and discuss. But of course, the ECOWAS leadership has a problem with the presence of Colonel Assimi Goïta now in that government, because it negates the demands now that ECOWAS had made right from the beginning of this process, asking that the entire persons now to lead the government should be civilian, that now you have a military man in the equation and people want to know if he's actually the one controlling things behind the scene.
Right, Deji, and now just talk us through the likely impact of these sanctions on the work of the new premier and perhaps what we should be expecting in the coming days.
Well, there's no question at all that the sanctions would obviously make the work of the new premier very difficult. We're talking about a situation where all the borders around Mali are closed. I'm talking about the ECOWAS borders now are closed. Financial transactions, I mean, financial flows are not allowed into the country. It's only a matter of time before the ordinary people of Mali begin to feel the pinch, even though the sanctions, of course, would allow medicines to come in, drugs to fight COVID-19 and all of that. But it's only a matter of time if the sanctions are not lifted. Now, if the sanctions are not lifted, say in the next couple of weeks, then I think the ordinary citizens will begin to feel the pinch, and then the government would begin to come under enormous pressure, especially the premier. So it makes things very difficult for the government, and that is why something has to be done. So we believe in the coming days there's a possibility that ECOWAS would be meeting with the leadership of Mali, especially the premier, and ECOWAS would, of course, make its position perhaps more clearly to the leadership of Mali. And we just have to wait and see how the new government now in Mali would respond. But obviously, it is crippling, the sanctions are crippling economic activities in Mali, and the situation would no doubt get worse if the sanctions continue to remain for weeks to come. Mahir?
All right, indeed, we will be keeping tabs on that situation. Deji Badmus, thank you very much for joining us live there from Lagos, Nigeria. Moving on, humanitarian agencies operating in Sudan are appealing for more funds to help displaced people. This comes as the North African nation struggles to deal with the devastation caused by the floods in many regions. According to the UNHCR and other independent aid organizations, refugees and internally displaced persons have been the hardest hit. Conflict in some of the flooded regions has worsened the situation. The most affected states are West, South, and North Kordofan, Sennar, Darfur, East Sudan, and Khartoum. UNHCR has been distributing non-food items to those forced out of their homes. The UN agency says it has received just 38% of the more than $274 million that it needs for its operations in Sudan as of September. Fighting continues between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Both sides are blaming each other for resuming the attacks that started on Sunday. In the latest developments, Azerbaijan said Armenia had shelled the town of Tartar, while Armenian officials said Baku resumed offensive operations on Tuesday morning. The Armenian Defense Ministry has also released a video showing artillery strikes on Azeri positions. Dozens have been killed in the renewed fighting, and a hospital in the disputed region has started receiving civilian victims. Mikhail Bardavid has more details.
On Monday, fighting continued for a second day between Armenia and Azerbaijan over in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Dozens have been reportedly killed on both sides, civilian and military. On Sunday, when the clashes began, Armenia had declared a martial law, as did Azerbaijan for some regions. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reiterated Turkey's solidarity with Azerbaijan and stated that Turkey's resources are available for support.
It is time to end the crisis in the region, which started with the occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh. The region will once again see peace after Armenia immediately withdraws from the Azeri lands it is occupying.
Armenia accuses Turkey of providing direct military support for Azerbaijan, a claim denied by Baku.
We deem this aggression as a blatant attack against democracy and human rights perpetrated by Azerbaijan.
There was also a statement made by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, who stressed that Russia was monitoring the situation closely.
We believe that the hostilities should be ended immediately, and the process of resolving the conflict between the two countries and its aftermath should shift to a political diplomatic sphere. For now, it's very important to stop the hostilities instead of figuring out who is right and who is wrong.
There was a similar call for dialogue by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which also stressed that maintaining regional peace and stability serves the shared interests of all parties. The latest fighting is the worst escalation of violence between the two countries in recent years. Clashes in 2016 left over 200 people dead. I'm Mikhail Bardavid for CGTN in Istanbul.
Well, the European Union as well as the United States have called on the two sides to take immediate steps to establish a ceasefire, and Iran said it's ready to use all its capacities to help start the negotiations between the two sides. Well, for a look at how this conflict began and why it remains unresolved, here is CGTN's Nicole Ang.
30 years of bloody conflict and deadlock. This is the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a mountainous area inside the borders of Azerbaijan, but where the majority of people are ethnically Armenian. Their cultures and religions differ. Azeris are predominantly Muslim and Armenians Christian. To understand how this came to be, we have to go back 100 years. Both modern-day Armenia and modern-day Azerbaijan were part of the Soviet Union. So in 1921, when authorities merged the mainly ethnic Armenian territory into Azerbaijan, it wouldn't be an issue for decades. All this changed in 1988 towards the end of the Soviet Union. New borders were drawn up and the Nagorno-Karabakh Regional Parliament voted to become part of Armenia. It would spark a war that's killed tens of thousands and left an estimated 1 million people displaced. In 1994, Russia brokered a ceasefire between the two sides, but it did not resolve the territorial dispute. And Moscow, Ankara and other regional powers have played a role in the conflict too. To this day, Nagorno-Karabakh is recognized by all UN states as being part of Azerbaijan. It is run and controlled, however, by Armenia-backed separatists. It's the longest-standing conflict to plague the former Soviet Union, and it's flared up time and time again, meaning where this latest escalation will lead remains a huge unknown. Nicole Ng, CGTN.
To Kenya now, where two young men who dropped out of school have impressed many with their innovations. CGTN's Nick Mudimba caught up with the innovators working on the outskirts of the capital, Nairobi, and reports on their journey in the world of science.
Just 20 kilometers from Nairobi City, you're welcomed by Moses Njoroge and David Gatho in their compound. They stay here with their grandmother who gave them some space to work on the innovations. They call it the backyard. Here we find wooden gadgets they have made, a virus decontamination system machine, an upper limb prosthetic arm, and the list goes on. Surprisingly, the two dropped out of school in the early stages of education. Here they make everything from junk.
I was born with this curiosity mind, and I thought instead of going on with this high school thing, let me start making what I want, or the passion that I have inside. And I started designing some gadgets, doing some mathematics here and there.
One of the key innovations is the virus disinfection machine. David explains scientifically how the gadget works.
This decontamination system, this chamber on the left side, it's the one that uses high voltage to smash the oxygen particles. And whenever oxygen particles, they are heated by a high voltage, they produce a certain electromagnetic wave.
The two men have used the science of neuroprosthetics to understand how human beings relate with machines.
Whenever I close my eyes or I deep think, I emit this band of frequencies ranging from 9 to 12 cycles per second, known as the alpha waves. These signals are tapped by this gadget, they are amplified, they are filtered, then converted to electronic current, and then transmitted externally to control various electrical and mechanical devices.
The innovators insist the same principles can also be applied on a vehicle, represented by this model, a homemade toy car that they say can be controlled by signals from the brain. Their grandmother has been with them all these years and has been impressed by the progress.
These innovations are purely a blessing. I also don't understand. He didn't get any of the ideas by going to school. It's just a blessing. He started repairing watches, later on he focused on phones, and now he makes so many things. And I don't understand what they make. When they make these things, they don't talk to anyone.
But for Moses and David, their quest is to empower those able to innovate but who don't have adequate education.
My dream, or our dream, is to have a facility where we'll be able to gather all the like-minded people in this field, because most in organization, they don't give people who are maybe Form 4 leavers and other people who aren't educational.
Coming up with such innovation like this prosthetic hand, of course, takes passion and so much time. But for them, they've been using zero budget just to come up with such a prototype, which I must tell you needs so much IQ and, of course, time to make sure you come up with such. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And it's time for the business. Here's Rama with the latest.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business. Nigeria set up a new outfit to help recover assets stolen from Nigeria and stashed away in foreign countries. And South Africa lost over 2 million jobs in the second quarter of the year. We'll look at the latest unemployment data next.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market, it's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Let's start in Nigeria. The government has approved the formation there of a new anti-corruption agency that will help with the management of recovered assets from outside the country. As CGTN's Enoch Sikoli now reports, that decision has drawn some mixed reactions throughout the country.
Nigeria's new anti-corruption agency will be known as the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Agency. It will have the responsibility of proper management of all assets seized in Nigeria or returned from abroad. According to the government, recovered assets are currently scattered across different agencies without proper control. Nigerians, however, see this move as yet another waste of resources.
As for me, I don't think it's too relevant in this particular season. That's not what we need now. What Nigerians need is our government to be productive. I see no reason why we have ICPC, we have EFCC, then creating another agency that will still carry out the same function just like EFCC or ICPC. To me, such money should be channeled into a different sector of the economy.
Nigeria has so far recovered over $300 million of stolen funds this year alone.
Nigerians want to see how these recovered assets would be used for the benefit of Nigerians and will not be relooted. Nigerians want to see how they can have access to this information of recovered loots. Nigerians want to see visible, usage, utilization of this recovered asset. If Nigerian government can demonstrate in a very clear terms this greater accountability and transparency in the recovered asset, then Nigerians will appreciate what government is doing.
The Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Agency will handle all proceeds from crime and corruption in the country. The Federal Executive Council has already approved the transmission of a bill to the National Assembly. The bill will undergo further deliberations and approval before its establishment. Enoch Sikoli, CGTN.
Still in the oil sector, Nigeria apparently plans to privatize the Nigerian National Petroleum Company and amend regulations on deep water royalties that were made last year. The changes are contained in the oil sector bill. President Muhammadu Buhari has finally presented that long-awaited draft law to legislators. The legislation has been in the works for 20 years, and it looks to revise laws that govern Nigeria's gas and oil sectors. It had not been fully updated since the 1960s because of the contentious nature of any change being made to oil taxes, the terms on which these changes would be made, and how to share revenues from the proceeds of the sale of oil and gas. The latest bill proposes to create a limited liability corporation into which the Ministers of Finance and Petroleum would then transfer the assets that NNPC holds. The government would then pay cash for the shares of the company, and it would operate as a purely commercial entity without access to state funding. Oil exports are finally resumed in Libya. Over the weekend, the eastern-based Libyan National Army lifted force majeure on the oil terminals it considered to be safe. LNA blockaded Libya's oil ports in January. Oil production in the North African state is now expected to rise to around 260,000 barrels next week, up from 100,000 barrels a day, at least in these specific ports, before the blockade. Here's CGTN's Adel Ehmarouki with the details.
Libya is officially back in the international oil business. This week, tankers began lining up at 3 operating oil terminals to ship the black gold to international customers. So far, production has reached 250,000 barrels a day, nearly triple the volumes produced before the oil blockade by the Libyan National Army commander Khalifa Haftar.
Oil is the main source of foreign currency to Libya. No sane man could take the decision to stop oil production, but at the same time, no sane man should accept the disproportionate sharing of Libya's wealth. The resumption of exportation is a great step that will relieve the hardships of all citizens.
Haftar's decision to resume production came after an agreement with his Western rivals to create a joint committee that overlooks the oil production and fairly distributes revenues among Libya's 3 main territories. 3 years ago, and after accusations against the government of National Accord of using oil revenues to fuel the civil war, the LNA took control of the oil ports.
When the oil fields were under the management of Western militias that backed the government of National Accord, it reported only 80,000 barrels daily of oil production. When the Libyan National Army gained control over the oil fields in 2017, specifically the Oil Crescent, the official production volume multiplied.
Libya is estimated to have lost at least $10 billion since the LNA's oil blockade began last January. That has led to severe deterioration in public services, including days of power cuts in one of Africa's biggest oil producers. North Africa's highest oil-producing country has the capacity to churn out 1.35 million barrels daily. Because of the logistical hassle of repumping oil from fields, it's highly unlikely for Khalifa Haftar to freeze production once again. And that is good news for Libyans who are living under one of the most devastating conflicts in the region. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, the number of people with jobs in South Africa fell to the lowest in 9 years in the second quarter, even as the official unemployment rate dropped. I know that sounds like a paradox, but we'll explain it in a bit. Now, according to Stats SA, the number of people who are employed in the workforce fell by 2.2 million to just 14.1 million in the quarter. That is the lowest since the third quarter of 2011. The official unemployment rate in Africa's most industrialized economy is now 23.3% compared to 30.1% in the first quarter. The decreases were observed in the formal sector at 10.8%, followed by the informal sector at about 22%. Private households also shared roughly 23% of jobs, and the agricultural sector was down by 7.6%. South Africa, as you might recall, imposed a fairly strict pandemic lockdown at the end of March, and that in turn squeezed both businesses and consumers. On to the latest report from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The OECD is urging governments and businesses to work together to improve environmental, social and governance investing data. The OECD report said that ESG investing, essentially sustainability investing as it's more commonly known, has grown steadily, but participants need comparable data across countries. Now, the report did highlight the current challenges, including a lack of cooperation between regulators and industry and inconsistent disclosure requirements. The report said that the most urgent need is to develop a common set of global guidelines on ESG data. Further afield, the World Bank now expects China's economy to expand by at least 2% this year. That's been revised upwards from the 1% growth that had been forecast back in June. Now, the strength and confidence comes from government spending, strong exports and early control of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has kept infection rates relatively low since March. But the World Bank also says that domestic consumption remains a bit of a drag. China's recovery also helped to lift the outlook for the entire East Asian Pacific region. Without China, the rest of the region is forecast to contract by at least 3.5% in 2020. Across the Pacific, a federal judge in the United States has questioned the government's evidence in a ruling that temporarily blocks a Trump administration ban on fresh TikTok downloads. In an opinion released on Monday, the District Judge Carl Nichols said there was no substantial evidence of the threat that the government claims TikTok poses to American users and their data. The judge put the ban on hold just a few hours before it was set to take effect on Sunday. Now, TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance, filed a request for a preliminary injunction against that ban. The decision now means that TikTok can operate without interruption. You can download it freely in the United States until at least a full court hearing and judgment comes to the table. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has slammed the United States for targeting TikTok.
China has always opposed the hegemonic behavior of the United States in generalizing the concept of national security, abusing state power, and unreasonably suppressing enterprises of other countries. We hope the US side will earnestly respect the principles of market economy and fair competition, abide by the rules of international trade and economy, and provide an open, fair, and non-discriminatory business environment for foreign companies to invest and operate in the US.
Right, and back to the continent for our last story in this segment. This one is from Ghana. The debate on whether or not to legalize commercial motorbike transportation rages as the country prepares to head to the polls in December. Now, while motorbike taxis do offer employment to many young people, there are still a lot of safety concerns about their operation. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
A normal working day for Kwame Yeboah as he waits for passengers. It's illegal to use motorbikes for commercial transport in Ghana, but Kwame has found ways of beating the system. He has been in this job for 6 years.
Due to how the police catch us, at the same time, because we read traffic light, we can't stop. Because the policeman is there. If you stop, he'll catch you. So you try to rush into the traffic and cause accident.
Commercial motorbike transport, popularly called Okada, derived its name from Nigeria, where it is the most common form of public transport in cities with heavy traffic. But in February, the Nigerian government banned its use in its first capital city, Lagos, due to safety concerns. In Ghana, opinions are divided on whether or not to legalize commercial motorbike transport.
This Okada thing is just a nuisance on our roads. They are a serious threat to our road users. For me, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the whole nation or for anybody else. For me, I think that's the last thing we deserve as a country. Legalization of Okada. I don't support it and would never support it.
I want the motorbike taxis to be legalized because it helps with easy movement in town.
Okada employs hundreds of young people in Ghana. Riders carry people to places where buses find it difficult to access. But last year, more than 4,600 road crashes involved motorbikes and caused more than 700 deaths. The motorbikes are not just a cheaper means of transportation. They also help many people beat heavy traffic on the city's roads. The Okada is also dominating political discussions as the country prepares for general elections. The largest opposition party, the National Democratic Congress, is campaigning to legalize Okada when it wins power, while the governing New Patriotic Party, on the other hand, says it will not. But safety experts want commercial motorbike transport to be legalized in Ghana despite the risks it poses to motorists.
It's a necessary form of transportation for a class of or a section of the population, that's one. And then two, we can make it safer.
Kwame Yeboah agrees. He says his decision on whom to vote for during the elections in December will be influenced by which party will legalize commercial motorbike transport in Ghana. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though, in global business. We'll be heading over to Egypt. Authorities are there gearing up for the launch of its first ever green bond. But this is a country, remember, that just raised $5 billion from the debt markets back in May. So why is it back for green debt? We'll be live in Cairo for some answers at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Maya.
Rama, thank you. Still to come here on Africa Live. A popular wildlife reserve reopens in Niger after 2 months of closure.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, in Niger, the Kouré Giraffe Reserve has reopened after 2 months of closure following a terrorist attack. 6 French humanitarian workers were among the 8 people killed in that attack.
Located 60 kilometers southeast of the capital Niamey, the Kouré Reserve is home to the West African giraffe. The surrounding villages have benefited from the tourist attraction. These protected animals may not have been aware of a terrorist threat that paused their daily interactions with human visitors. But the reserve has now reopened.
More than ever, the state of Niger is taking all necessary measures to create the conditions of security that will allow all our visitors to visit Niger in peace and the population to live in peace and carry out development actions. We will do our utmost to attract visitors and lovers of Niger to come and visit us. We reassure them that their safety will be guaranteed.
As you have seen with us, safety is guaranteed. We urge everyone to come and visit Kouré. I'm very pleased and satisfied that the authorities came in large numbers to this ceremony.
During the reopening ceremony, Niger authorities committed to securing the habitat of more than 600 giraffes. Locals welcomed the revival of tourist activities at the reserve.
The closure of the Kouré Giraffe Reserve caused by the tragic attack on August the 9th has profoundly affected the socio-economic sector of the area because many people in Kouré depend financially on the income from tourists. Today, the reopening of the site makes us very happy.
After the attack, we went through a very critical situation because we are living off the support of some NGOs. Thanks to the food aid that we received, we were able to make our ends meet. We very much hope that the Kouré area will be safe. And we believe that with the reopening of the site, the state will take precautions to better secure the area.
The site had previously been labelled as a red zone by France, which advised against travel to the area. A military presence in Kouré is helping to ensure security. The Ministry of Tourism says it will gradually reopen other tourist sites that are still closed. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. We look back on the magic of the Safari Rally ahead of its return to the World Rally Championship.